Fujifilm launched its first medium format camera back in 2017, but so far the cameras have been niche and not terribly user-friendly. With the launch of the 102 megapixel gfx100s, however, it has finally made a model that looks and feels like a normal mirrorless camera. The gfx100s isn't much larger than Panasonic's full-frame S1, and it feels similar in hand. However, it packs a sensor with 70% more area and over double the resolution. Fujifilm says it's faster than the GFX100 and GFX50s models, and it offers features you'd expect on a mirrorless camera, like eye-detect autofocus and high-quality 4K video. At $6,000, it's not cheap though, so I was curious to see how it performed in the real world. I also loaned it to a pair of professional photographers who were considering buying this very model. Did it convince us? Let's find out. Fujifilm's big trick with the GFX100s was to reduce the size while keeping the same 102 megapixel sensor as the GFX100. At 900 grams, it's a full 500 grams lighter than that model and even weighs slightly less than the GFX50s. At the same time, it feels a lot better than either of those models. That's because the GFX100s is shaped more like a conventional mirrorless camera than past models, and the grip is larger and more comfortable than ever. It's not quite as dial-rich as the X-T4 and other Fuji X-series cameras though. You get a pair of command dials and a joystick that now supports diagonal movements unlike past GFX models. It also comes with a mode dial and focus selector switch, plus buttons for the drive select, quick menu, and more. Up top is a display that lets you see settings, simulated mode dials, and a histogram. To get that size down, Fujifilm developed a new, smaller image stabilizer. It delivers 6 stops of shake reduction, a half stop better than before. With that, I was able to get some sharp shots at relatively low shutter speeds down to 1/8 of a second or so. It has a fixed 3.69 million dot EVF that's less sharp than the 5.76 million dot model on the GFX100. However, it's still sharp enough for most types of shooting. The 3.2-inch, 2.36 million dot rear touch display tilts down, up, and to the side. It lacks a flip-out display, but nobody's going to be vlogging or shooting selfies with this type of camera. Other features on the body include dual high-speed SD card slots, a USB port for charging and data transfers, mic and headphone ports, and a micro HDMI port. The battery from the X-T4 isn't as large as the ones on other GFX bodies, but it does offer a reasonable 460 shots on a charge. There's no option for a vertical battery grip like the GFX50s, but that's a fair trade-off for the drastic weight reduction. With all those changes, the GFX100s feels a lot more like a Fuji X-series camera than ever before. All the controls are where they should be, so primary ISO, shutter, and aperture settings are easy to adjust. The menu system isn't the best out there, but you can largely control things with the Q menus or manual controls. Performance is where the GFX100s starts to feel a little different from an X-series camera. As you'd imagine with a 102 megapixel sensor, it's not exactly a speed demon, with shooting speeds of just 5 frames per second and a buffer limit of 14 raw images. However, that's over a gigabyte's worth of data, bear in mind. The autofocus system uses 3.76 million phase detect pixels with up to 425 selectable AF points. It also offers touch selectable continuous AF tracking along with eye and face detect AF. The AF isn't terribly snappy either, with some lag that was particularly noticeable after testing Sony's A1. The eye detect system works reasonably well, but isn't dead reliable if your subject moves much. On top of that, the speed is highly dependent on the GFX lens you're using. Still, this is probably the best AF system on any medium format camera, and besides, it's not designed for shooting sports. Also, lenses like the GF80 f1.7 have a lot of heavy glass that the AF system needs to push around. All things considered, you can count on it to deliver sharp shots for the type of studio and landscape shooting it's designed for. And when it comes to image quality, the GFX100 really delivers. Where you might think that a 102 megapixel sensor would have tiny pixels, they actually have the same pitch as Sony's 61 megapixel A7R4. When combined with the backside illumination and dual gain design, the GFX100s is actually a pretty good camera in low light. I saw very little noise at ISO 6400 and got clean images at ISO 12800 with some light noise reduction. At lower ISOs, the gfx100s is sublimely sharp, making it ideal for things like archival preservation on top of portrait and landscape work. If 102 megapixels isn't enough, you can use the pixel shift option to get 400 megapixels, though that really requires a tripod and a static image. A sensor this large delivers incredibly shallow depth of field if you need that for portrait shooting. Combined with a fast lens like the 80mm f1.7, it allows for incredible bokeh and subject separation. When shooting RAW, you'll get top-notch dynamic range that's on par with recent Sony and Nikon models. It also delivers 16-bit rather than 14-bit RAW images, though you're not likely to see much difference unless you really peep those pixels. Either way, they deliver extraordinary latitude and pose to crop, pull up shadows, and bring highlights back. Most GFX100s buyers won't shoot JPEGs, but if you do, it delivers sharp, color-accurate images right out of the camera. That's ideal for previews or for folks who want to use Fujifilm's impressive film simulation modes. For the GFX100s, Fujifilm has introduced a new one called Nostalgic Neg that's based on the look of US photographer Stephen Shore. I tried to use the GFX100s as a street camera with the electronic shutter, but that was a bad idea. The camera has horrendous rolling shutter in that mode when you don't hold it very still. Unless you're on a tripod, stick to the mechanical or front curtain shutter settings. The GFX100s is far and away the best medium format camera for video. Fujifilm's line skipping implementation does have compromises, but makes the best use of that immense sensor. By doing that, Fujifilm was able to use the full sensor width for the maximum amount of depth of field control. Video isn't as sharp as you'd see with downsampling, but it's better than any other medium format camera I've tried. Considering how bad the rolling shutter is in still mode, it's actually reasonably well controlled for video, maybe just a bit worse than Sony's aging A7 III. The image stabilization works pretty well for video, and you can supplement that with a digital IS mode. Still, I'd only use it for static handheld shots and not any tracking, panning, or tilting, or the rolling shutter will rear its ugly head. Surprisingly, you can shoot 4K 10-bit video with Fujifilm's F-Log options, and for extra flexibility in post, it will even capture 12-bit ProRes RAW files to an Atomos Ninja 5 recorder. While it's a touch soft, video is easy to manipulate in post and has a certain dreamy quality only a large sensor can offer. As with photos, colors are accurate and skin tones pleasing. I wouldn't recommend it if you're in the market for a video camera, but if you shoot the odd video along with photos, it works very well. The GFX100s is certainly not for everyone. You can get faster and better handling cameras for around the same or much less, like the $3,900 Canon EOS R5, $3,100 Nikon Z7 II, $3,500 Sony A7 IV, or $6,500 Sony A1. After using the camera for several days, I and my photographer friends very much appreciated the image quality for studio and archival work. However, they found that the speed and focus hit rate didn't meet their needs for covering births or weddings compared to their Sony A7R III and other Sony models. It does go to show that cameras aren't reviewed or purchased in a vacuum. Sony and Canon have set extremely high standards for autofocus with relatively high megapixel cameras. I wouldn't expect a large sensor camera to keep pace, but the GFX100s was not even in the ballpark. That being said, it's still faster than all other medium format cameras and delivers the best image quality available for photographers who absolutely demand that. For $6,000, it's actually a steal for that kind of buyer. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe to keep up with all the latest tech content.